Welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and today we're joined by the founders of Parents Addicted to Hope. Linda and Diane are going to share their powerful story of addiction, loss, and their family's struggle to make sense of it all. By sharing what they've learned, they hope to help families faced with the challenge of substance abuse, mental health, and addiction. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're doing some great work. You've been through some great personal struggles. Linda, tell me a little bit about what you're doing and why you're here today.
So we are here today to talk about kind of the next steps of what we would like to do in both personally dealing with our own grief and struggles, in both seeing the life of an addict and dealing with the loss of one. And we have a group that we've started to form called PATH, Parents Addicted to Hope. We have a Facebook page, and our ultimate goal really is to turn that into a nonprofit once we get enough people involved, primarily parents, but we're also not opposed to having really anyone that's been affected by the opioid epidemic. And we really want to use this group to both encourage and support parents that have lost a loved one, but also we really want to focus on being solution seekers and really trying to kind of start at square one and see if we can't get education and advocacy out there to try and prevent further deaths from happening.
And this is really from a point of view where you went through this process without all this help.
Correct.
And you're trying to put it together so other people can benefit from it.
Yeah. Part of what we both discovered, and most of the parents I've talked to, is that once you find yourself in a situation where your loved one has actually passed from their addiction, you don't know who to turn to. You go to look for grief groups or support groups, and there's every kind of group you can imagine, but there's really nothing for people that have lost someone to addiction. And it's a very specific type of thing. You're dealing with the loss, but you're also sort of reliving and dealing with all of the things that happened before that, oftentimes for years. And so it's a very unique situation.
Now, Diane, you've gone through a similar experience. Mm-hmm. Did you know each other before, after, during? How did you two connect?
Jordan passed away in March 2017. Richard passed away July 2017. We had a mutual friend. She reached out to me. She told me about Linda. She had just lost her son, asked if it was okay to share my information. Absolutely. We met up, we had lunch, we were both on the same page. There was no support out there in Des Moines for us. We were just lost. We shared each other's stories about the boys and decided we needed to take this another step so that parents wouldn't have to go through what we were going through.
So this is a big deal because you found no support group.
Correct.
For what you were going through. And there are a lot of parents in Iowa that have lost
Right.
children.
And a lot of it, I'm sure, has to do with the stigma, and they're not ready to come forward at this point. But there are a lot of them out there. Jordan himself had lost 2 other friends, and within a couple months before he passed and a couple months after he passed. They're out there. We're still losing these kids, and we need to figure out a solution to help the parents and help the kids at the same time.
And now talk more about this stigma.
Stigma is huge. I find it really to be the biggest barrier of being able to move forward and for people to come together and find solutions and work together. You find even amongst medical people. I was a nurse for 30 years, and I can tell you that behind the curtain or behind closed doors, when we would have a patient come in or even be talking to a patient on the phone that was struggling with addiction, they're struggling, they're hurting, they're saying, I'm ready for help, I'm hopeless, I've hit rock bottom. And even in those moments, a lot of the medical staff were so quick to make judgment. And it's a real barrier.
It's an interesting parallel because when I heard about the name of your group, Parents Addicted to Hope, and then I realized that that's really viable in the context of addiction, and I've never heard of a support group for somebody in recovery from that addiction to the hope that everything would be okay. And when it's not. How many more parents have you encountered now, and how many people are you in contact with because of this work you started to do?
I couldn't even tell you. We are coming in contact with more and more people locally, but like Diane said, even amongst the parents themselves, there's stigma there. There's such fear of judgment because it's there. And when you read an obituary and it says, 21-year-old died suddenly and unexpected, you know what the situation was. But even the parents, because the stigmas are so afraid to step forward. And, the name of it, it was exactly as you just described it. It's like in going through watching them deal with their addiction and all of the ups and downs and the ugliness of that, you're also dealing with, then the death and the grief and constantly finding hope. Just finding that hope and grabbing onto it and just never letting go of it. Essentially I was becoming addicted to never letting go of that hope is the only way that we all will survive this, and also the only way that we can move forward together.
Thank you for that. When we come back, I'll invite you to share a little bit about your personal stories and what you've been through so our audience can get a sense of that. When we return, Linda and Diane will share more about their personal experiences. You don't want to miss this.
Many teenagers don't understand the dangers and effects of marijuana use. Now it's time for Just the Facts, ma'am. An IQ is a score determined from standardized tests to determine intelligence. An IQ of 100 puts the average person in the 50th percentile of intelligence. Regular marijuana use during teenage years can cause a long-term 8-point drop in IQ. A loss of 8 IQ points drops them to the 29th percentile. For more information, go to drugfreeiowa.org.
My dad thinks he can fix anything. But at least once a day, we catch him doing that with our modem. Like things would magically be faster if he could just get it high enough. He doesn't get that it's our phony internet. Looks like I'm gonna have to fix this one. Siri, get me faster internet.
Okay, calling Mediacom now.
Drop the phony internet and get a real deal. Add Mediacom Internet 60 for just $14.99 a month for a year. Call today.
Watching your sister go through withdrawal is the last thing you expect to do. You hope she gets past it, but worry she'll relapse. The story of addiction is all too familiar, but you can change it.
That's 2 out of 3.
If you or someone you know is in recovery from addiction, share your story with the partnership at drugfree.org, because your story can change someone else's.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're talking about the confusion and pain when addiction threatens to destroy a family. Linda and Diane are both survivors, and they have stories they need to share with you, and you need to hear. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Well, we've heard a little bit about what you're doing. Let's bring tie the dots together. Diane, tell us a little bit about how this all moved through your life and what you went through.
Jordan, I had him at a young age. He was my baby. We noticed about 12, 13, a little bit of changes in him. Started noticing he was smoking marijuana, met up with some other friends, probably not the best group. That led into getting into pills, led into a lot deeper list of different drugs that he experimented with. I went into cardiac arrest. I was pregnant with my daughter. Went into cardiac arrest, had picked up the boys, him and his friend. They had gotten in trouble. Jordan saw everything, blamed himself for what we went through. Shortly after that, we made it through that. He continued to use. New Year's Eve one year, last thing out of my mouth was, you better be careful. The police are out. Got a phone call. Mom, I'm in jail. I got arrested. Went and bailed him out. told him he had to suffer the consequences to it. We didn't know if he was going to graduate at that point or if he was going to end up spending the graduation in jail.
He was a high school student still then?
High school student. He actually graduated early. He graduated in December. So my biggest fantasy was, of course, to watch him walk across the stage. I wanted that. 2 days before graduation, we found out that he got probation, had to serve that and pay the fees, and he walked across the stage. He went into Mecca for 2 weeks. That's all they kept him, was just for 2 weeks.
It's a drug treatment facility.
In Des Moines, yes. Made it through everything, went and visited him one weekend, and he pulled out a piece of paper, both front and back, filled with all of the drugs that he had ever used. And at this point, I had been in denial. My husband was telling me this, that he was using, and I didn't want to believe it. To look at that list was just heartbreaking. Ended up going into his room one day, needed to get something, found the syringes for the first time. I kicked him out of the house. That was the hardest week for me. What mom kicks their kid out of the house? But I knew for the safety of our other children, we needed to make this step. After he got on probation, met his girlfriend, I really think between those two things, that's what saved him. He was clean for 2.5 years. July of 2016, he had his friend over. They were like brothers. Ended up using that night heroin. His friend came upstairs and he's like, you need to call somebody. Jordan's down. We need to get him help. My husband and I run downstairs. And there's our son gasping for air. My husband's doing CPR on him. Ambulance come. They gave him Narcan. We were able to save him. Went to the hospital, got in the room. The first thing he said to me was, Mom, I promise you I will never do this again. I'm so sorry. I promise you I won't do it again. Had to suffer the consequences to that. Had a detective tell him that if he turned in 3 different drug dealers, that no charges would be pressed against him. He comes back home and he says, Mom, I don't even know 3 drug dealers anymore. I haven't been doing this. That was just a one-time thing. We would go to a hotel in Clive and pick up drugs. So we ended up having to face the consequences to that. Again, slap on the hand, basically, probation. His best friend went away into treatment because there is nothing in Des Moines or the state of Iowa to give these kids long-distance treatment. Long-term treatment that they need. And so he ended up leaving, went away for 30 days, came back, was super excited. He'd got his GED. My husband and I hugged him. We're like, we're going to take you out, for your birthday, got your GED and everything. We never got to do that. He passed away from an overdose at the beginning of October. That was Jordan's first friend that we lost. Jordan took that really hard. That was his brother. To watch my son stand up there and talk about his best friend and cry was very heartbreaking. My husband and I sat in the back of the cemetery and watched all these kids crying over losing their friend and hoping that this was going to open their eyes. Jordan did okay. We hit the beginning of March 2017, found out some stuff about his friend and how he did end up dying. Jordan got up that morning, it was March 25th, nothing out of the ordinary. Mom going to work, see you when I get home. Jordan and I always talked. We talked every day, whether at text, in person, whatnot. Got home about 6 o'clock that night, knew he was home, yelled downstairs. He didn't respond, nothing out of the ordinary, didn't think anything of it. When he came home, he usually went to sleep for a little bit, for a few hours, and waited for his girlfriend to get off. We went out, we came back about 8 o'clock again, still hadn't heard anything from him. Started texting him, nothing. My son and I went downstairs, started banging on his door, no response. My son went upstairs to get my husband. He came downstairs, banged on the door, no response. He had to get back upstairs. Our youngest was in the tub and we needed to get her taken care of. My son ended up picking Jordan's lock, opened the door, turned around and looked at me and he goes, I can't do this again. And there lays Jordan in the same spot as before. And I yelled at him to go upstairs and get his dad. And I went over to Jordan. You knew he was gone. We knew he was gone. He was cold. It was different this time. My husband came in, started doing CPR, kicked me out of the room. Didn't want me to see Jordan like that. I went upstairs, called 911. We got everybody over. Within 35 minutes, they came up to me and they said there was nothing more they could do. I needed to make that call. I couldn't make that call. I waited for Jordan's dad to come over because I didn't want it to be finalized. About 30 days later, we got the toxicology report. He had carfentanil in his system. His heroin was laced with carfentanil. He had more carfentanil in his system than he did heroin. My son was killed by an elephant tranquilizer. I always say he made the choice to put the needle in his arm that night. I've come to accept that, but he never would have done that, knowing that the carfentanil was in it.
There's tremendous power in that story. When we get back in the break, we'll talk a little bit more about the things that happen behind the scenes. And we'll ask Linda to share her story as well. When we come back from the break, we'll talk more about their experiences and how they're now connecting with this world of pain that parents feel and confusion, and ultimately the potential for hope. Stay with us. You don't want to miss this. See you after the break.
You wouldn't walk through the halls of your school naked. Yet without thinking, many teens sext explicit photos of themselves to friends using cell phones, never thinking it'll go further. But once you hit send, you're exposed. You're out there in cyberspace for everyone to see. Sexting, it's dumb, it's dangerous, and it's against the law.
My mom thinks hashtags are something you eat with eggs. She legit has a meltdown every time her phone updates. Last week, she asked me to explain chat snap. So of course, she chose the absolute wrong internet provider, and now we have the slowest internet ever.
Escape Planet Slow and get a real deal. Add Mediacom Internet 60 for just $14.99 a month for a year. Call today.
After Kylie used coke, she stopped caring about school, friends, or who she had to steal from to get more of it. The story of addiction is all too familiar, but you can change it.
Sleeping in, Dad?
If you or someone you know is in recovery from addiction, share your story with the partnership at drugfree.org, because your story can change someone else's.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're learning that even in the darkest and most desperate of circumstances, there are places to turn to find hope. Facing the greatest darkness in your life, you can actually succeed in dealing with it. Linda and Diane are back to talk about their experiences to help you. Linda, you too, from a different perspective. There were a lot of spaces and pain in Diane's story. And she felt it from one side, but you were a nurse and saw a completely different side. Please share what you've been through.
So my son Richard, he really struggled and kind of dealt with some demons from a very early age. I finally had him diagnosed in 4th or 5th grade with Asperger's, which is high-functioning autism. Very, very intelligent, but a lot of trouble with socialization, organization. School was terrible. So starting about 4th or 5th grade, he started to get a little aggressive towards his sisters, and things just kind of spiraled from there. We moved out of state for my husband's job, and I knew things were not right. I started at that point trying to get help at school, trying to get plans drawn up. It was a nightmare experience. At least by 6th grade, having been a nurse, having worked for the Poison Center, I talked to people all the time about, I found this package of, this number on the back of it. What is this my kid's taking? And I mean, I'll be honest, I could go in his room by 5th grade. I found things like computer cleaner, inhalants, cough syrup, ordering all kinds of stuff off the internet, you know, that was herbal products for all kinds of things, making his own capsules. I saw it. It was all right there in front of my face.
And he's not the only one then. If he's doing it, other kids his age
Oh,
are
absolutely.
doing the same thing.
Absolutely.
And how old was he
And
then?
that was by 6th grade.
Wow.
And he went to a sleepover at a friend's house. I think it was probably about 9th grade. And I had a kind of a bad feeling about this kid. And this kid had an older brother that Richard got to know. And I don't know exactly what he was introduced to or what they did those couple of nights, but it seemed like from that point on, you could just see that his behaviors and his aggression, his moodiness and all of that was just very quickly increasing. And I was finding more evidence of things that he was obviously using. Very erratic behaviors, wouldn't socialize at all to the point of wouldn't even eat dinner with his own family. Tried to start a fire one time in the garage. You know, all of these things that really are huge red flags. But as so many parents say to me now, you know, I found the red flag, what do I do now? And I think that's one thing I really want to get out in the public and talk about is when you do find that bottle of cough syrup that's empty in their bedroom, you know, realize first and foremost that, you know, that's probably something that they're using as a quote unquote medication. And what do I do now? How do I approach this subject with my kid?
How old was your son when he passed?
He was 24. Right after he graduated high school, they had just sort of pushed him through. He disappeared. And eventually he texted me back one day, and it was a one-word answer, said Phoenix. And he had left with nothing and somehow had found his way to the West Coast. And he continued to do that many times over the next 5 or 6 years. Many parts of that 5 or 6 years, we would just be at a loss, not knowing where he was, if he was alive. He'd call because a crisis had happened or he needed money. He'd say he wanted to get better, that, you know, he'd found a job, things were getting better, and then it would just spiral.
And you could see this even at a young age. Oh, it's so important that you get to share these ideas and messages with parents so they can learn from what you've been through. Thank you for sharing your story. After a short break, Linda and Diane will share some insights and advice that may help you not only find hope in the darkness, but maybe save a life. Stay tuned, you don't want to miss this. Start through there.
You have to help her! Help her!
Hey, Sam, can you hear me? Looks like an overdose. Do you know what she was taking?
She doesn't do drugs. Her friends don't do drugs.
No, listen, we're just trying to save your daughter's life. Any idea?
Going to the movies, son. See you later.
Bye, Sam. Sam, wake up!
Sharing. I mean, I don't mind it when there's enough to go around. Toys with Charlie? Okay. My mint ice cream? Fine. Our slow internet with my whole family at the same time? That's pushing a man too far.
Get unlinked and get a real deal. Add Mediacom Internet 60 for just $14.99 a month for a year. Call today.
I thought texting friends on her cell phone was harmless.
But there she is, our daughter, topless for everyone to see.
I'm so embarrassed for her. I can't even imagine what she must be feeling. How did this happen?
What was she thinking?
Someone sent our teenage son a photo of a naked classmate. If he forwards it, it's a crime.
Our son committing a crime? I had no idea.
And he could be labeled a sex offender.
Tell your teen, sexting is a crime.
My dad thinks he can fix anything. But at least once a day, we catch him doing that with our modem. Like things would magically be faster if he could just get it high enough. He doesn't get that it's our phony internet. Looks like I'm gonna have to fix this one. Siri, get me faster internet.
Okay, calling Mediacom now.
Drop the phony internet and get a real deal. Add Mediacom Internet 60 for just $14.99 a month for a year. Call today.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad, and maybe the most important part of our show, where our guests get to share some insights and advice with us. Pay close attention. It can make a difference in your life and the life of those you love. Welcome back. This is your chance. Diane, start us off. What advice will you give to parents? What things that you've learned that you just wish every parent would know so they don't have to go through this?
Come forward. Go find the help for your children. Fight for them, be their voice. I mean, we did so much with Jordan. I was in so much denial. I stepped back and I regret that now. Moving forward, I want to try to help these kids. I mean, we've went to schools, we've went online, we've done a lot of speaking engagements. We're trying to get more parents involved in this. It's not going to go away. And it's going to take baby steps to get it fixed. And we're here for the long haul. And we're going to do this in remembrance of our children, of our boys.
And your family's behind you.
Our family's behind us, absolutely. Okay. We have 3 other kids. We've got to watch them, 2 teenagers at home right now. So we have to keep a close eye on them.
Linda, what advice would you share with parents, and tell us about your organization and how they can connect with you?
They can connect with us by going on Facebook and typing in Parents Addicted to Hope. PATH is the short name of our group. And it started out to be just for parents specifically that had lost a loved one, but I've come to feel like anybody that has an interest in helping with this crisis, which by the way is going to get a whole lot worse in the next 5 or 6 years than what it is now, and they can do anything. They can make a poster, they can write a letter, they can comfort someone. There's something that someone can do if they're interested in helping.
That's great advice. And so even people that may sense there's a problem without having had loss can come to you for help on how to deal with these things. You know, I can see how you make each other smile, and how what your organization has done, just bringing the 2 of you together, helps find hope and a great attitude in dealing with this. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today, and keep your eye on Mediacom MC22 for our next episode, where we explore Iowa stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Only on Surviving Bad on Mediacom MC22, your local programming leader.